Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Daily Devotions. Pastor Dino here with you in this gloomy, rainy Wednesday morning. So happy to have you with us. Welcome those on YouTube and Facebook. We want to begin here in chapter 10 of Ecclesiastes. We are concluding the book of Ecclesiastes today, and we'll begin something brand new tomorrow. But here we are in chapter 10. But before we read chapter 10, just one verse that springboards us into this chapter, and it's found in chapter 9, verse 18. It says, "Better to have wisdom than weapons of war, but one sinner can destroy much that is good." And that leads us into chapter 10, and that is true. One sinner can destroy much that is good. This is the principle that we read in 1 Corinthians, where the Bible tells us here, as we read it, notice it says that when it speaks of leaven, leaven is a picture of sin. And 1 Corinthians tells us that if you put a little bit of leaven, which is yeast, yeast is a picture of sin, a little bit of yeast, leaven, in the bread, and you allow that to amalgamate inside the bread, well, eventually it expands and the whole bread is corrupt. The whole bread becomes corrupt by this yeast that permeates. It's like poison. You know, if you have some water and you just put a little touch, a little drop of poison, cyanide for instance, that will affect the whole cup of water. Just a little bit. It's a little crack in the ship. That little crack in the ship can actually cause the ship to sink. Doesn't have to have a huge, massive crack. One crack, a little bit of water gets into that ship, and eventually water will get into that ship and sink it. Just one crack. There's a spiritual lesson here. If we're not careful, friends, that sin that we entertained, it might seem like a small little white lie or small little compromise. If we're not careful, that can eventually corrupt and even destroy you if you don't deal with it. Doesn't have to be a lot. Small can become a lot. Small can become big if you're not careful. That's why it says one sinner can destroy everything that's good. That's what happened to Achan. Because of Achan's sin, Joshua chapter 7, his whole family, even Israel, suffered the consequence of defeat because of one man's sin. That's what's being implied here. One sinner can destroy. Look, a little foolishness, in other words, because Solomon speaks a lot of foolishness, spoils terribly. Sin and foolishness can undo a lot of good in a very short time. That's what he's trying to say, and that is true. And that springboards us right here into chapter 10. As dead flies cause even a bottle of perfume to stink. You see that? We all know. In the summertime, when I see the flies in the house, I don't like. I mean, I want to get rid of those flies, man. One fly will sit on your food. Friends, you better be careful because there's a lot of bacteria in flies. It can affect everything. You can't eat it. Just one fly can ruin a full course meal. Isn't that true? Can cause even perfume to stink. How incredible that is. So a little foolishness spoils a great wisdom and honor. And so you know that. You can be wise and smart, and then you're at a party or whatever, you're in a gathering, and you act like a fool. You do something that is foolish. You might get drunk or something like that. I'm speaking, of course, from a natural perspective. And all that wisdom you might have when someone sees you drunk, they say, look what a fool he is. Look how and they'll look at you as a fool. Even though you might be very wise, even though you might have done great things, that one act of foolishness can destroy your reputation. That's why Solomon said earlier, you should Cherish a good reputation. Work on your reputation. It might take years to work on your reputation, and then one act of foolishness can destroy it. A wise person chooses the right road. A fool takes the wrong one. True. That's why Jesus said there's two paths of life, the broad and the narrow. You've got to choose which path you want to take. And it's the foolish person that chooses the broad path. Why? Because the broad path speaks of the flesh. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Live it up. And this is what Solomon was trying to preach earlier. How amazing is that? He says, you can identify fools, verse 3, just by the way they walk down the street. There's a certain disposition they carry, a certain arrogance they carry. You can tell. Verse 4, if your boss is angry at you, don't quit. A quiet spirit can overcome even great mistakes. Don't quit. A quiet spirit. Speaking of you. In other words, you can be a light. You can be an example. You can turn that boss around. You can turn your husband around. You can turn your wife around. You can turn that situation around by your life, by your example. And that's what we read here in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse number 10. Look what it says. But for those who are married, I have a command that comes from me. But for the not from me, but from the Lord. A wife must not leave her husband, but if she does leave him, let her remain single or else be reconciled to him. And that's what it says now. Now I will speak to the rest of you, though I do not have a direct command from the Lord. If a Christian man has a wife who is not a believer, now watch this now, and she is willing to continue living with him, he must not leave her. And if a Christian woman has a husband who is not a believer, and he is willing to continue living with her, she must not leave him. For the Christian's wife brings holiness to the marriage, and the Christian husband brings holiness to his marriage. Otherwise your children will not be holy, nor you be holy. But if a husband or wife who isn't a believer insists on leaving, let him go. So what is being said here? What's being said here is that if you're a Christian and you're living at home and you got a husband who's not serving God, but you're serving God, stick it through, because your example can turn your husband around. Your lifestyle can turn your wife around. Now, this is applicable if you are truly following Christ. This doesn't apply to everybody. If you're not following God, then you won't be an example. You won't be a light. Paul is addressing believers who are walking with God. Your life can make a difference, my friend. You can make a difference at work, at home. This is incredible. That's why the Bible says one can chase 1,000 and two can chase 10,000. Your life can make a difference. One with God is definitely a majority, not a minority. And then we read verse number 14. I didn't get a chance it says here that you can bring, in a sense, holiness. Holy, wow. That will turn everything around. And so your life is important. You can make a difference. Verse 5, there's another evil I have seen under the sun. See, Solomon's constantly speculating, analyzing, always talking about what I've seen, what I've noticed, and what I've observed, and what I'm learning. Solomon was forever increasing in knowledge, but never coming to the truth. I've said this yesterday. There are people who love knowledge, love to observe, love to find new facts, and like to find new material. Oh, did you see what's going on? And there's a new insight, and we like to follow fads and something new. Let me tell you, friends, if you're like that, you might have a lot of knowledge, but you'll never come to know the truth. People are always searching and, I want to see that. There's a proper way to search, but there's an unhealthy way to search as well. If you're just searching for new things and new, something fresh, and, like a Gnostic has a certain understanding of, I've got a special revelation, a special Gnostic. And there are people who are just looking for special revelations, but they're not really looking and searching for truth. Ever increasing in knowledge. They're puffed up. They're arrogant. Solomon is, I just want to find something new. But he discovered there's nothing new under the sun. Nothing new under the sun. But he's still looking. He's still searching. Here he is. He said, I've seen something under the sun here, something a little bit different. Notice what he says here. There's another evil now I've seen. Well, I've seen a lot of evil, but here's another one. He says, kings and rulers make grave mistakes when they give authority to foolish people in low positions to make people proven worthy. I've even seen servants riding horseback like princes and princes walking like servants. Like, what is this? Is this talking and speaking, waxing eloquent, sounds so intelligent? But what is he really saying? It seems very poetic, but he says here, basically, that I've seen these servants riding on horseback, but these are servants. They shouldn't be doing this. In other words, he's noticing that there's been servants who are trying to usurp authorities, but that somehow the authority is allowing the servant to do that. In other words, the unjust and destructive delegation of authority to those incapable of using it wisely is a mistake. Why are you giving people authority? But I don't understand, Solomon. Why wouldn't you? Well, you think it's only about your authority? Only about what you can do? It's almost like he's against giving other people authority. In other words, that there should be just a one-man show here. Well, maybe that's what got you into trouble, Solomon. You thought you were indispensable. Is that not why you compromised God's word? Is that why you thought you were invincible? Let me tell you something. If you're a leader and you don't want to give people under you authority to do things, you're a dictator. And that's a problem. I think you should. I think it's important to be a team. Solomon had no team. He was it. That's why he got in trouble. And if you see authority, people in leadership, and they don't want to delegate, they just want to do everything themselves, a one-man show, I tell you, friends, that's the seed of destruction right there. Pride and arrogance. There's no one like me. That's what happened to King Uzziah. He thought he was the cat's meow, and he fell miserably. Look, he says favoritism, nepotism, extortion, bribery. Bribery can place the most reckless fools in the most powerful positions. And now he's saying, some of these servants, maybe they did that because or maybe there was something that was not pure, and that's why you gave them this position. That's not true. It says here in verse 8 and 9, you dig a well, you might fall in it. When you demolish an old well, you could be bitten by a snake. When you work in a quarry, stones might fall and crush you. When you chop wood, there's a danger with each stroke of your axe. My goodness. So what are you supposed to do? Just not live, not do anything, not step out? He's saying, look, if you're given this position, you might hurt yourself. Like he's bringing something negative. It's like you can't even try anything. Well, what are you supposed to do? Just live under a rock and die? Using a dull knot axe requires great strength, so sharpen the blade. Well, okay. It's hard to grasp what he's really trying to say here. He's saying, well, if you're going to use an axe, make sure it's sharp, because if it's dull, it won't be worthless, and you might even hurt yourself. Well, he's actually giving you something negative before you even try it. He's telling you, and there's people that way. They always tell you, you know what? Don't try because you're going to get sick. Or don't do this because you're going to hurt yourself. You know what? Don't attempt to do anything because you're not going to succeed. Well, then what's the purpose of trying? Of course there's going to be risk in doing anything. And Solomon said, well, don't bother because you're going to be defeated. Do you know people like that? They're always telling you it's not going to work. It's not going to, you better be careful. Don't do this. Don't do that. So just stay put and be mediocre for the rest of your life. People who give you this advice never achieve anything. They don't take risks. They don't step out. Imagine if we operated that as believers. You'd never find scriptures like you do in 2 Corinthians 5:7, that we are to walk by faith and not by sight. Because sometimes sight will tell you to stay put when God's telling you to stretch and step out. Fools are destroyed by such things as foolish promises, getting caught in false testimonies and making wrong people angry. That's what we see here in verse number 11. If a snake bites before you charm it, what's the use of being a snake charmer? Can you imagine that? It's incredible. Fools are destroyed by things, false promises, making people angry. But it's hard to really fully grasp why is he saying this. He says, verse 12, wise words bring approval, but fools are destroyed by their own words. Absolutely. Talks a lot about foolishness. Fools base their thoughts on foolish assumptions. True. But no one can predict the future. Verse 14. So what are you saying, Solomon? It just seems like it just doesn't seem to make sense. And basically, it's part of this negative disposition that Solomon has throughout this book. Nothing is certain. He says the dead and the living, they're both going to the same place. I've seen everything under the sun. Everything is vanity. Hey, kings, leaders, don't give any opportunities to your servants. And if you do have opportunities, servants, you're going to fail anyway. And if you have an axe that's not sharp, you're going to kill yourself. So sharpen the axe. Well, of course you're going to sharpen the axe. But even if you sharpen the axe, he says, it's still vanity. Like, there's no sense to what he's saying. There's no sense, brothers and sisters, because that's what happens when you're backslidden. You lose perspective on everything, and everything is negative. Don't try this because you're going to be a failure. That's what he's saying. Don't attempt anything. You're not going to succeed. Can you imagine living like this? He says here, fools are so exhausted by the little work that they can't even find their way home. Fools are so unaccustomed to work that when they actually try to work, they become exhausted. Well, that's true. It seems kind of funny. Says you're lazy, and when you're trying to work, you get tired too quickly. You know, people, they always say, oh, I'm tired. Well, you're tired. Some of you are tired just by doing one thing, because you're not used to work. This is what he's saying. I know people like that. They're lazy. And if they finally do something, you find, oh, I'm so tired. Well, you just worked a few minutes. Well, you're not used to working. There are people that way. I see that. Verse 17, happy is the land whose king is noble, whose leaders feast on proper time, to gain strength for their work and not to get drunk. To gain strength to the work and not to get drunk. What does this mean? Wise leaders take their leisure only after their work is finished. And that is true. Have your leisure after the work. I know people, they start something, they don't finish it. They start something, they leave things by the side. They never really finish it. What he's saying here, finish your work, then have some leisure. Not have leisure, don't finish your work, have some leisure, I'll do it tomorrow. He's again speaking against procrastination. And that's one of his themes. And that's one thing about Solomon that he was right on. Procrastination will get you nowhere. If you're going to have leisure or leisure, you want to take some time off, take it off. But make sure you take your time off after you finish the task, not before it. And that's wisdom. That is real wisdom. A party gives laughter. Wine gives happiness. Money gives everything. Oh boy. A party gives laughter. Well, yeah, laughter is good. But parties where all you have is laughter, I can guarantee you that's filled with fleshly activity. And I can guarantee you there's nothing wholesome about that. Then he says wine gives happiness. Well, in Proverbs, Solomon, you said wine is a mocker. What's going on here? You see, again, a backslidden mind lost discernment. You told me, Solomon, in Proverbs, that wine can be a mocker. Now you're telling me wine is good, wine brings happiness, wine brings laughter. Well, what are you saying? And then he says, money gives everything. Yeah, he's been saying that, but he's wrong. Can you imagine if this was true? Money gives everything? Money can give everything, yes, from a natural perspective. But I'll tell you something, if you're in pursuit of money, I guarantee you, my friend, you will fall. You can't be a God chaser and a money chaser at the same time. That's the problem with the world. Jesus said the very opposite that Solomon said. So you seek first the kingdom of God, and whatever you need, I'm going to give you. Solomon says, no, pursue money. It's everything. Are you kidding me? Solomon, that's what got you into trouble. Your pursuit of money, sex, and nobility, and all these things in this world that you think, this is what caused you to fall. So, never make light of the king, even in your thoughts, and don't make fun of the powerful, even in your bedroom. Imagine that. For a little bird might deliver your message and tell them what you said. Kind of interesting. Interesting here. It's often a mystery how someone knows what we have said. Well, the best way to control our reputation and what we do is to control your thoughts and to control your mouth. How many times have you talked behind the scenes? You talked against him, you talked against her, and you may have said, don't tell anybody. But by and by, that person finds out. Like it says here, a little bird might deliver your message. How did they find out? Well, friends, you can be sure they'll find out. How do you deal with that? Don't talk behind people's backs. People say, "Oh, don't let them know it. Don't let that. Don't let." Well, you can be sure if you're saying that there's something not right in what you're saying. Because if you don't want people to know, then why are you saying it? It's basically what I've been saying before. The secret in serving God is doing things in secret that are pure. If you're doing things in secret that are pure, then you don't care who knows. Did you hear what I said? If you're doing things that are pure when nobody's looking, then who cares who's going to know? Chapter 11 and 12, I just got a few moments. Send your grain across the seas, and in time, profits will flow back to you. Ecclesiastes 11:1. Whatever you sow, you reap. He's right. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Jesus said that. Proverbs 11:24. Solomon said, give freely and become more wealthier. Be stingy and lose everything, or stingy rather, and lose everything. And so, if you give, you will receive. That's a principle even in the New Testament. You wonder why some of you don't have much. Maybe you're not giving much. Think about it for a moment. Some of you should be tithing, you're not tithing. If you sow sparingly, you will reap sparingly. I don't preach much on this, but it's a reality, it's a truth. You wonder why some of you don't have much. Is it possible because you're not giving much? You know, the best tithers in the church are not the rich. The best tithers in the church are those who maybe are just making an average salary. Now you think about that for a moment. Verse 9, young people, I'd like to go, well, let's just go further. This is actually important. It says, when clouds are heavy, the rains come down. Whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. Did you see that? What is he saying? Listen, you can't always wait for the right time. I got to wait for the right time. Well, that's true. The timing is very important. But if you are going to operate because it's sunny outside or because the circumstances look like it's the right, I got to do it now. If you're only operating by what you see, then you're doing the very opposite of what God teaches us in 2 Corinthians 5:7. We are to walk by faith and not by sight. You can't do or not do something because certain things appear to be a certain way. If you know in your heart that God is directing you or doing something, you got to operate. You don't operate by what you see. That was the lesson that we learned with Peter when he was in the boat, when he saw Jesus, and it was windy, there was a storm, and there were clouds, and Jesus said, Peter, come and walk. And Peter, oh, okay, he sees Jesus, he hears his voice, he steps up by faith, and all of these, right away when he stepped out, he began to notice the clouds, and he noticed the winds and the rains, and he started to doubt, and he began to sink. Friends, we can't operate by what we see physically. Decisions cannot only be made by what you see physically. Some of the greatest decisions I've made were made when things didn't make sense, when really I should have done the opposite from a natural perspective. And this is what Solomon, and here is where we start to see his wisdom really in an incredible way, because now Solomon is going to change. Brothers and sisters, chapter 11 and 12, we see the beginning of Solomon's transformation. I'm going to be a little longer today because it's our conclusion, and I don't want you to miss this. So he's saying you need to operate on a different level. You won't really succeed spiritually if you only operate in the ways of the flesh, in the ways that seem natural. Jeremiah 42:6, we will obey God whether it seems good or whether it seems evil. That's what Solomon is saying. You can't go forward because of what you see all the time. It might take faith to go beyond what seems to be. It says, plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you do not know if it profit, it will come from one activity or another, or maybe both. Just keep going. Keep persevering. Be active. Be active. When people live to be very old, let them rejoice in every day of life, but let them also remember there may be many dark days. Everything still to come is meaningless. Now we think that this sounds like the old Solomon, but here it is. Here's where we see the change, brothers and sisters. Here's where we see something really powerful happening in Solomon's life. He's old now. He's old. These are his last days. These are his final words. Chapter 11 and 12, final words. Young people, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember that you must give an account to God for everything you do. Wow. What? Solomon has come to this conclusion. Young person, do what you need to do, but remember, be careful because you got to give an account. Now, he said this before in chapter 11. He said this in other scriptures in a different way, and we're going to find that he said this in his last words, and we'll get to that in a moment. But he says, remember that you must give an account. It is appointed unto man once to die, then the judgment. You're right, Solomon. So be careful how you live. Be careful what you do. We didn't hear this before. Refuse to worry and keep your body healthy. But remember that youth with a whole life before you is meaningless. So be careful to remember the Lord. Otherwise, it's of no avail. Wow. Chapter 12. So don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. He's keeping on this theme. Don't let your passions, don't let life blind you from the reality that you need God and that you forget God, because when you're living it up, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die, you're not thinking of God. You're thinking of yourself. You're thinking of flesh. Solomon now, who's been saying this the whole time, is now changing his perspective. We see a change, Solomon. These are his last words. Life is not pleasant anymore if you don't remember God. Wow. Life is not pleasant. Why is he saying that? Because that's how he lived. He realized life was not pleasant because he forgot his God. Do you see that? He's coming to this conclusion. Remember him. Now he gives us several reasons why we are to remember him. Just like his father David, who said, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all of his benefits. Now we see Solomon acting like his father. Oh my goodness, we didn't see this before. Solomon now is giving us an eternal perspective of what's really important. What's important is not the things of this world. What's important is not to live it up in this world. What's important is what Paul said in Colossians 3, to set your affections on things above and not of this world. What's important is to be heavenly minded, friends, that this life is but a vapor, that one day we're going to meet God. He says, remember him before the light and the sun. Remember him before your legs guards your house start trembling, and before your shoulders the strong men stoop. Remember him before your teeth, your few remaining servants stop grinding before your eyes. The woman looking through the window see. He's just giving some examples, but they seem a little strange. But he's just giving us, remember him in everyday course of life and how you live and what you do. Remember him, verse 5, before you become fearful of falling and worry about danger in the streets, before your hair turns white. Remember him basically in daily living. Remember him when you get old. Don't forget God. Don't forget God. Verse 6, remember your Creator now while you are young. What a statement. He's now addressing the youth, because he remembers when he was young, he had a relationship with God, backslid, now he's old, and he's saying, I made a mistake. Don't forget God. I forgot God in my pleasures. I forgot God in my success. And that's why I've said over and over again, friends, we can handle poverty a lot better than we can handle prosperity, because prosperity can cause us to go a little crazy. Prosperity can cause us to shift and to fall back and to start living it up, and we forget our God when we do that. Look what he says here, verse 7. Don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. For then the dust will return to the earth, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Wow, Solomon, I see a change here. You're talking about God. You're talking about eternity. You're talking about what's going to happen to us. What will happen? We will go back to the earth. Our bodies, and I always quote this at funerals, at the burials, at the interment. This is what I quote. I quote what Solomon says. The body will return to dust, will turn to earth, but look, the spirit returns to God. Exactly what the Bible says, to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. He's giving us something, my friends, that is so powerful that when we die, our bodies go to the earth, but it's our spirit that's important. All these verses and all these chapters, Solomon's talking about the flesh, the natural realm. Now, there's a shift. He says your spirit's going to be with God. That's what's important. Not the flesh. Not the flesh. Return to God who gave it. Verse 9. So keep this in mind. We're going to meet God, and that's what's important. Don't forget, young person. Don't live it up and forget God. Put God first in your life while you're young, before the devil gets a chance, gets a crack at you, before he begins to introduce you to things that will lead you astray. Drugs and wild revelries and debauchery. Young right now. That's why I'm going to baptize some people this Sunday. And one of them is a young girl. I'm excited about that. Serve the Lord while you're young. Keep in mind this. Verse 10, the teacher sought to find just the right words to express this truth. Are you ready? Here are his last words. And this is what we close with, friends. The greatest advice. Here it is. Solomon gives it, and I've preached from this text many times. The wise words are like cattle prods, painful but helpful. Their collected sayings are like a nail-studded stick with which a shepherd drives the sheep. Oh, they're piercing, in other words. Are you ready for this? He's introducing it. Watch this. Verse 12. But my child, let me give you some further advice. Here's his last advice. This is it. This is Solomon's last words. This is Joshua's farewell message in Joshua 24. This is Moses' farewell message about keeping the commandments of God. Solomon says the same thing. Joshua said, choose you this day whom you're going to serve. What does Solomon say? He says, be careful, for writing book is endless and much study wears you out. Don't just be seeking knowledge for the sake of knowledge and reading. It's going to wear you out. Ever increasing in knowledge but never knowing the truth. He's speaking by experience. What is the conclusion? What's life all about? Are you ready? What life is all about? Verse 13. This is the whole story. Oh, I love this. This is the fait accompli of everything. This is the crème à la crème. This is the crescendo of life. The purpose of life. What is it? Here now is my final conclusion. Okay, Solomon, you brought us through a vortex of all this obscurity, even carnal desires and carnal pursuits. And Solomon saying, I was wrong. Here it is. Fear God. Oh boy. I don't even hear him saying this. No. Fear God and obey his commandments. Wow. Two things he gives us. Then he gives us the third thing. To fear God means to honor God too. And to fear God is true wisdom, true knowledge. Everything else was all carnal, Solomon. But you finally have given us the best advice we can receive. To the young person and to the older person. And obey. Obey. How many times did Jesus? Obey. You shall eat the good of the land. Isaiah 1:19. Obey, and I will manifest myself unto you. John 14:21. Wow. For this is everyone's duty. This is the conclusion of the whole matter. To obey God, to fear God. What advice? This I say to everyone who listens, to every young person. When you're young, learn to walk with God, to fear God. For this is the whole duty of man. Now watch this now. And here's the fourth element. For God will judge us, everything we do, including every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. What a statement. And this is what he concludes, my brothers and my sisters, the book of Ecclesiastes. Fear God, obey his word. God's going to give an account of how we live. You see, when you forget God, you don't care how you live. So Solomon spoke by deep experience. Solomon didn't give us these words just haphazardly because he was raised in the church and he went through hell. He backslid, and he finally, after all these pleasures and all these activities, the wisest, richest man, he said, you know, all that means nothing. Everything is meaningless unless you serve God. Wow. And that's what I want to leave with you, my friend, as we conclude this book. Put God first. Obey his word. This is what life is all about. Serve the Lord. Nothing greater, nothing more important than that. Because one day we're going to face him. We're going to give account of our lives. We see this in 2 Corinthians 5. The bema seat judgment, the word works will be judged. 1 Corinthians 3. What we did, what we said, our motives will be judged. And we will be given crowns as rewards for our service here on earth. But if you don't know him, you'll be judged. In your life, your spirit, you will spend a whole eternity away from God in darkness. And Solomon is saying, fear God. What a horrible thing. What profits a man? Solomon could have written this. If he gains the whole world but loses his soul, God will bring the judgment. Disappointed that the man wants to die, and then the judgment, Hebrews 9. I pray, friends, everyone who's listening to these words, that we will face God, and God will say to us, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Come and enter into your rest. Wow. I pray these are the words that we all will hear. Father, I thank you for your precious word, and this book that has taught us so many things. I want to give you praise, Lord, for your goodness. And help us to live a life that's pleasing to you. That all of us one day will hear that word, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Amen. Bless you, my brothers and sisters. Thank you. I want to encourage you to come out tonight to our prayer meeting. We are praying for Logos. We are praying for the leadership, that God will bring the right pastor. As most of you know, that I am retiring, and we're praying for the right leadership to come in, and we need his wisdom. And so come and pray with us. Please, I pray for all of us to do that. We thank God for his goodness. God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow morning, Lord willing. Bye for now.